July 24, 1918, in a hospital in London, a man died. Peter Sellers, Inspector Clouseau, Dr. Strangelove, one of the world's greatest comedians. But before he died, he told a friend, "I was never the real Peter Sellers, because there is no Peter Sellers." That man brought thousands of characters to life, but he never knew who he himself was. Because Peter Sellers' tragedy was this: he became so many other people that he forgot how to be himself. And at the end of his life, nothing remained, only emptiness. Before we reveal how the world's greatest character actor lost himself completely, hit subscribe for more shocking untold stories about geniuses who paid the ultimate price for their art. Peter Sellers was born in 1925 in England. His mother and father were traveling theater performers. As a child, Peter went on stage. He imitated characters. He made voices. He made people laugh. But at home, Peter's mother Peg controlled him. She controlled everything. "You're special," she'd say. "You're different from others. You can't be like them." Peter grew up dependent on his mother. He couldn't make his own decisions. Even when he turned 20, his mother controlled him, who he could befriend, where he could go. Peter remained a child. He never became an adult. In the 1950s, Peter started doing comedy on radio, The Goon Show. He created numerous character voices. Each character had a different accent, a different personality. Peter could switch from one to another in seconds. People were amazed. "This man is a genius," they said. But Peter's friends noticed something. Peter kept talking as the characters even when the camera stopped. The real Peter was disappearing, because there was no real Peter. In 1960, he appeared in The Millionaires with Sophia Loren. During filming, Peter fell in love with Sophia. But in a strange way, Peter fell in love as his character, not as his real self. Sophia would later say, "When I talked to Peter, I never knew if I was talking to him. I was always a character." In 1963, Dr. Strangelove came, Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece. Peter played 3 different roles, all 3 completely different, all 3 perfect. Critics showered praise. Peter Sellers is a genius. But Peter had a mental breakdown during filming, because 3 different characters were living in his head at once. Kubrick later said, "Peter is difficult to work with, because you never know who he is." That same year, Peter had a heart attack. He was 38 years old. He nearly died. While lying in the hospital, Peter said, "I died. I saw the white light, but they sent me back." From that day on, Peter became obsessed with death. He lived in constant fear. In 1964, the Pink Panther came, the Inspector Clouseau role. That role made Peter a superstar. Clouseau became legendary, but Peter hated Clouseau. "This character is destroying me," he said. "People see me as Clouseau." Because Peter wanted to play other characters. He wanted to be taken seriously. But studios only wanted Clouseau. "Make another Pink Panther," they said. Peter accepted because he needed the money, but inside he was breaking. By the late 1960s, Peter's behavior became uncontrollable. Marriages ended. He married 4 times, divorced 4 times, because his wives couldn't understand him. One wife said, "Living with Peter was like living with 20 different people. None of them were real." Peter fought with directors on sets. "I won't play this character this way," he'd say. Then he'd change his mind. Then change it again. Nobody knew what he wanted, because Peter didn't know either. In the 1970s, Peter started using drugs, marijuana, cocaine, to numb the pain. In an interview, he was asked, "Who is the real Peter Sellers?" Peter replied, "I don't know. I never knew. I only play other people." In 1979, Being There came, Peter's last great film. He played a simple gardener. He barely spoke. He was just there. His performance was magnificent. He received an Oscar nomination. But during filming, Peter collapsed. Because that character reminded him of himself. Empty, silent, nothing. "Playing this character is killing me," he told the director. "Because this is me." In the summer of 1980, Peter's heart had problems again. He was hospitalized. Friends visited. But Peter spoke as characters. The real Peter never emerged. One friend cried. Even in that hospital bed, he wasn't himself. He was playing a character. On the morning of July 24, 1980, Peter Sellers died. Heart attack. He was 54 years old. His funeral was held in London. Hundreds came, Sophia Loren, Spike Milligan, old friends. But the speeches had a strange tone, because nobody knew the real Peter. One friend said, "Peter played thousands of people throughout his life, but he never learned to be himself." After his death, Peter's will was read. He'd made a strange request. He wanted Glenn Miller's In the Mood played at his funeral, and he'd left a note. "Throughout my life I searched for the real Peter Sellers, but I never found him." Years later, actors talked about Peter, what it was like working with him. A genius, they said, but tragic, because Peter Sellers sacrificed himself for his art, but in the end there was nothing left to sacrifice. Only characters remained, and behind the characters there was nothing. Directors who worked with Peter in those final years described a man constantly shifting. One moment charming, the next cruel. One moment vulnerable, the next arrogant. "You never knew which Peter you'd get," one director said, because even he didn't know. Blake Edwards, who directed the Pink Panther films, later admitted, "Peter was the most talented and most tormented person I ever worked with. The characters he played were more real to him than reality." Peter's children struggled with their father. They tried to have conversations, but he'd slip into characters, even at the dinner table, even on birthdays. His son Michael later said, "I never had a father. I had Inspector Clouseau and Dr. Strangelove and dozens of others, but I never had Peter Sellers, because he didn't exist." The drugs made it worse. By the late 1970s, Peter was mixing alcohol with prescription pills. His behavior became erratic. He'd fire entire crews. He'd refuse to work for days. He'd show up in character and refuse to break. On the set of Being There, he terrified everyone. He'd sit in silence for hours, perfectly in character. When someone tried to talk to him, he'd only respond as Chance the gardener. The director Hal Ashby said, "I directed a character, not an actor, because Peter had disappeared so completely into the role that I'm not sure he ever came back." That Oscar nomination for Being There should have been a triumph, but Peter couldn't enjoy it. He watched himself on screen and saw nothing, just emptiness performing emptiness. "That's not acting," he told a friend. "That's just me being nothing, and everyone thinks it's brilliant." In his final months, Peter became obsessed with spiritualism. He'd hold seances, trying to contact his mother, trying to find answers about who he was. "Maybe if I talk to her ghost," he said, "she can tell me who Peter Sellers was supposed to be." But the seances gave him nothing, just more emptiness. Friends who saw him in those final weeks described a haunted man, terrified of death, terrified of life, terrified of the mirror, because he didn't recognize the face staring back. "Who is that?" he'd ask, looking at his own reflection. "Who is that man?" However, the heart attack came suddenly. Peter was at home, alone. He called for help, but it was too late. By the time paramedics arrived, Peter was unconscious. At the hospital, doctors worked for hours, but his heart had taken too much damage over the years. The 1963 heart attack, the drugs, the stress of being everyone except himself. At 12:28 a.m. on July 24th, Peter Sellers was pronounced dead. The news shocked the world. Headlines everywhere. "Comedy genius dies." "Inspector Clouseau creator dead." But very few mentioned the real tragedy, that Peter Sellers had died years earlier, the moment he realized there was no real self to find. At the funeral, they played In the Mood as requested. People laughed through their tears. It was so Peter. Absurd, unexpected, perfectly in character. But what character? Nobody could say. Spike Milligan gave a eulogy. "Peter was my friend for 30 years, he said, and I never met him. Not the real him. I don't think anyone did. I don't think he ever existed." The casket was closed. Inside was the body of Peter Sellers. But who was Peter Sellers? The genius comedian? The tortured artist? The absent father? The impossible colleague? All of them. None of them. Everyone except himself. Peter Sellers was the world's greatest character actor. Inspector Clouseau, Dr. Strangelove, hundreds of other characters. But Peter never knew who he himself was, because he became so many others that he forgot how to be himself. His mother controlled him, Hollywood exploited him, characters consumed him, and at 54 he died as an empty man. Sometimes the greatest geniuses pay the greatest price, and Peter Sellers gave everything for his art, even himself. But art gave him nothing back, only emptiness, and Peter Sellers was lost in that emptiness, forever. The tragedy of Peter Sellers isn't that he died young, it's that he never lived. From childhood he was performing, playing roles, becoming other people. And somewhere in all that becoming, he forgot to be. His epitaph could have read, "Here lies Peter Sellers," or someone pretending to be him. Nobody knows for sure. Because in the end, even death couldn't reveal who the real Peter Sellers was. He'd spent his entire life hiding behind masks. And when the final mask came off, there was nothing underneath. Just the echo of 1,000 voices and the silence of the man who never existed.